You are listening to Productivity Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after productivity coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives entrepreneurs the straight talk on personal productivity. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Productivity Straight Talk. Today is episode 192, The Magic Connection Method with Brandon Fong. If you're a business owner who wants to improve your time management and elevate your productivity so you can maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you joined me. Ooh, we are in for an exciting, fast-paced episode because you are going to get to meet our guest, Brandon Fong. Brandon is an entrepreneur, author, marketing nerd, world traveler, and goofy husband to his wife, Leah. He's also the creator of the Magic Connection Method, which you get to hear about today, and founder of the 7-Figure Millennials, where his mission is to inspire millennial entrepreneurs to pursue big financial goals while prioritizing their happiness, health, and relationships. Brandon and I really got to have a great conversation. And look, I have pretty high standards of who I invite on Productivity Straight Talk and have conversations with. And that high standard comes because I really hold sacred your time, your attention, and really the opportunity to be with you in these episodes each and every time. And Brandon reached out to me and had an incredible proposal on how he could bring value to my listeners. And when we spoke in this conversation, and you're getting ready to hear, he didn't just give me a great pitch, he delivered. And as a host, as someone that, brings someone on the podcast, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. He genuinely wanted to really bring the value, and he did. So I just share that behind the curtains because it's not always that I walk away from a conversation saying, you really impressed me and you made me proud that I said yes to bringing you on as a guest. And that was a resounding yes for Brandon. So before we jump into my conversation with Brandon, all about the Magic Connection Method, I want to make sure that you have gotten your hands on my free mini training, Take Back Your Time. Now, this free mini training is to solve this. Do you whisper to yourself, I wish I had more time? There's never enough time. Does time stress you out? In fact, is time a 4-letter word for you? I have that up on my wall in my office. Time should not be a 4-letter word. Now, if you are having challenges with managing your time or feeling like you just don't have enough time, this free mini training is a great place to start. Here's my promise. Give me less than 30 minutes in this mini training, and I will show you how to reclaim 30 minutes back each and every day. That's right, compounded each and every day. So make sure you get your hands on this free mini training by going to amberdelagarza.com/take back your time. And now let's meet our guest and get to the straight talk. Hey, Brandon, welcome to Productivity Straight Talk. How are you doing today?
Amber, I am doing fantastic. Super excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You submitted to be a guest on the Productivity Straight Talk, and I don't always say yes to guests I don't know, but when your topic came through and you were so thorough with the connection of productivity, I was really, really excited to say yes to you. And so before we dive into the Magic of Connection Method, I would love our listeners to get to know a little bit about you personally and about your business journey. And then lastly, if you can tell us, why am I talking to you about the Magic Connection Method?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot to handle there. But I like to start with kind of my story because I think it relates directly into the Magic Connection Method. So my entrepreneurial journey, if you want to call it, started at Wisconsin Hills Middle School. So the reason why I started there is because when the school bell would ring for lunch, if you can kind of imagine when you were in middle school, if you're listening to this right now, the hallways would kind of flood with all the crazy, obnoxious sixth graders, whatever the heck was going on. And if you looked really closely, you would kind of see little nerdy Brandon hanging out behind everyone. I had these big glasses and Bugs Bunny teeth. I would kind of be hanging out, trying to procrastinate going to lunch. And you may be wondering, why the heck would any sixth grader try to procrastinate on the one time that they have freedom outside of the classroom, right? So I would go through the lunch checkout line. I'd have my plastic tray with my chicken nuggets and the curly fries or whatever was on sale for the day. And I'd put down my plastic tray next to the lunch lady. I'd type in my student ID, and then up on the screen would pop the words, Brandon Fong, $0.00. And the reason why it showed that is because my family qualified for the free lunch program at school. And I used to be so embarrassed. I used to try to distract my friends some days so that they wouldn't see the computer screen. Some days I would try to hide out in the bathroom a little bit ahead of time. And the reason why I was so frustrated back then is because I wished my family had more resources. But what my parents taught me and what I learned over the years is that it wasn't about learning. It wasn't about having resources. It was about learning how to be resourceful. And one of the things that my parents taught me from an early age of how to be resourceful is the power of human connection. And so I'm so blessed for everything that my parents did for me. But one of the things that they did is they would let me skip school as a 16-year-old and go to local networking events. So I was the 16-year-old and I had this opportunity to talk to people that were way more experienced than I was and learn how to connect with them. So I kind of started developing these connection skills at a really early age. And if you fast forward to my senior year of college, I ended up using these connection skills to reach out to a really successful entrepreneur. At the time, he had over 100,000 students in his online courses, 1.5 million downloads on his podcast, a TED Talk, and all that stuff. And I just kind of felt like David versus Goliath, kind of, like, who was I, some college kid, to reach out to this guy? But I figured, what, I've been practicing connection for a while. Why don't I just reach out to him? So sent an email to him, and that ended up turning into an incredible relationship where for 3 years, I ended up working with him. We added over 100,000 students to his online courses, 1.5 million downloads to his podcast. And Jonathan got into, Jonathan was the name of the guy I reached out to. He got into this high-end group called Genius Network. And if you're listening to this, you're not familiar with it, Genius Network is a high-end mastermind. It costs $25,000 a year to attend. You need to be making at least 7 figures to be in the room. And Jonathan got into that group and he said, I want Brandon to come along with me. So again, I found myself at age 22 being the youngest person in the room and getting to learn from these incredibly successful people. And I was just so blessed from that. So all that said, to share this story, there's really 2 main takeaways that I think your audience can get from this. One is the power of what one connection can do for you. I really believe that if you're listening to this, you are just one connection away from anything that you want in your life. And today we can talk about the magic connection method and how you can specifically do that. And the other reason why I tell that story is because, and I don't know if we want to dive into this in today's episode, but I learned that people that are incredibly successful, they have all the things in the world, all the money, right? But sometimes that doesn't necessarily bring happiness. You can have all the things you want in life, but still not be happy inside. So that's the other reason why I created my podcast, 7 Figure Millennials, where I'm on a mission to inspire millennial entrepreneurs to prioritize their happiness, health, and relationships while making their biggest entrepreneurial dreams a reality. And I'm on my own journey to 7 figures. So I'm kind of sharing that along the way. So those are the 2 things that kind of explain my story and the connection to why I'm so passionate about connections. And then I don't know, Amber, if there's anything you want me to clarify on there, or I can dive right into why I think this is a perfect topic for productivity.
Okay. Yes. Okay. I'm gonna interject a little bit. Well, great job on the power of story, because you plucking out your experience in junior high. Now, you and I have literally not met. I think we've been on this call for 4 minutes total. We went right to record, and I already feel connected to you because I had the same exact experience in junior high. I also got free lunches, and I also was incredibly embarrassed. And I also thought the worst part of my day was lunch. So I'm listening to this, like literally leaning into my computer, like, okay, where is he going with this? This is so good. And I do want to say that why I wanted you on here is because when I look back at my business, I can do hard things. Everyone, I believe, listening to this can do hard things. It doesn't mean it has to be done that way. Because when I also look back at my own growth and journey, some of the biggest leaps forward that have been the easiest have been through connection. And I love that you have this on a purpose. So when we're looking at how do we show up most effectively and most productively in our businesses, This is why I wanted to talk about the power of connection and prioritizing that. Because Brandon, do you see, before you jump into your model, I have a question that's burning. Do you see that people squeeze it out because they don't value the time that it takes to build these connections?
Can you just clarify when you say squeezing out? What do you mean by that?
So my listeners often say, oh my gosh, I don't have time for another thing, or my schedule's so full. I don't have time to go to that networking event, or I don't have time to do another luncheon. Oh my gosh, when am I going to squeeze it in? And looking at this from a lack instead of, I would assume, the long-term game of it could be the single best decision in your business.
Yeah, well, Amber, I love this question, and let me answer it by, I just want to give you a compliment and tell your listeners how awesome you are, because I've listened to the show and I love your definition of productivity, of investing your best time into your best activity. And to me, connection is a direct relationship with your definition of productivity, because if you know how to connect with people that are in their strengths, that complement your best activities, that is really a multiplication factor. So to me, it's not even of how should you squeeze your time. This is really the pure definition of productivity, is if you can stick within your unique ability after you understand what that is, identify other people that complement your best activities, that is really multiplication of productivity right there. So I think that if your listeners are spending a lot of time in the day-to-day, they're focusing on putting out fires, or that other bucket, the everything else bucket that you talk about, that, you should consider, well, maybe you are not spending as much time in your best activity. You could learn by connecting with people that can help supplement and putting you inside of your best activity so you can be the most productive.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Okay. Go for it. Share with us. That is the perfect connection. And thank you so much for sharing that with our listeners, that connection. All right. So let's dive into what you call the magic connection method.
Yeah, of course. So there's 3 steps to it. It's pretty simple. And I'm very blessed to say that I had the opportunity to work with Jonathan, who had over 100,000 people on his email list. And I was the marketer on that for several years. So when I say I've sent millions of emails, it's not that hard when you have 100,000 people at a time, right? So outside of that, but I've also sent to lots of individual people. So let me just say that the whole goal of this entire message is very simple. And the goal of the first message that we're going to send in the Magic Connection method is to get people to respond. And when I'm talking about this is mostly from the context of email, but you can use this on any platform where you're sending any form of written communication. This will work. So I will talk about it from the context of email, but you can also apply it in other places. So backing up, the whole goal of this entire message is to get people to respond. That's it. I find that so many people, they make this mistake of trying to do way too many things inside of the first outreach when you really don't know who they are yet, right? So like the whole goal is not to book a call, not to send them to their website or to download something. It's simply just to get them to lean in and engage in the relationship with you. So there's 3 steps to making that happen. And Amber, if there's a way that if you want to pause me at any point, we can go through these if you want to clarify, but maybe I'll pause after each step and you can ask me any clarification questions. But step 1 is the hook. And the number one mistake that people make when they reach out to someone on any platform is I see this all the time on LinkedIn, is they make it all about them, as in the person that is reaching out, they make it all about them. So they'll be like, hi, my name is Brandon Fong and I'm the founder of blah, blah, blah. And I've done blah, 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 blah. And I'm sure anybody listening to this, you can go on your LinkedIn or anywhere really, and you can see examples of people that are trying to posture themselves and make it about them, when really it should be about the person that you're reaching out to. They need to know why they should even care, or why they should even listen to you to begin with. So in the very beginning, we want to set a completely different standard from the noise of everybody else that's clamoring for attention, talking about how awesome they are. And we want to make it about the person that we're reaching out to. So there's really 3 main ways that I think are the most powerful that you can leverage inside of this hook, or the opening sentences of this outreach that you're sending someone. The first most powerful way that you can include in this hook is if you have a mutual connection with them, because that automatically separates you. So do some time to do some research, or as you continue to network, you're going to start to have more secondary connections. And if you can mention that in a way that complements the person that you have as a mutual connection, that's a great way to introduce that. Another way is content. So I call this the 3 C's. So connection, content, or complement. So if you've consumed their content, you could be listening to this show right now and love Amber's definition of productivity and tell her how incredible it is. I don't know about you, Amber, but like whenever I get an email like that, like I love reading that kind of stuff and I don't really ever get sick of it. So if you can reach out out in a way that say, hey, Amber, thank you so much for sharing your definition of productivity. It's helped me to get X, Y, and Z results. And I really just from the bottom of my heart, really appreciate the work that you do and sharing what you do. That is like something people would love that. And that is another example. It was kind of a hybrid of content and compliment. But if you can give someone a genuine compliment about the work that they're doing, that's another great way to open an introduction to any kind of message that you're sending. And the last thing I'll say on this hook is that this is just 1 to 3 sentences. You don't want to go what I call kind of like, I make a joke and I call it like the serial killer line, right? Because it's nice if you're complimenting someone, but if you send them a paragraph where it's like a book, and I know Amber's the productivity expert here, she could tell you how creepy it is to get an email from somebody that's like, it's like they wrote you a novel. So there's a line here. We just want to do 1 to 3 sentences showing that we took the time to research them and compliment and show that we're genuinely showing up the right way. So I can kind of pause there for a second. Amber,
Yes.
Is there anything you want to add there before I move on?
I have lots of questions and ads. So yes. Okay. So we're going to pull this back. First of all, okay. One is that this isn't just an email. Let's just talk about the mediums. How can this be used? So we talked about LinkedIn, making a connection on LinkedIn. I'm going to throw out podcast, asking to be a guest on a podcast, because these rules so far, I don't know what rules 2 and 3 are, but so far, this will really get you in there for a guest to be a guest. What other ways are you looking at, like a connection if you want to work with somebody and you've targeted them to be like your top client? Give us some real use cases that you would use this framework.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. Absolutely. Getting on podcasts. I've used this magic connection method to get on plenty of podcasts, and it's an incredible way to open the doors to relationships. For client relationships, I would say, and we'll go into the other steps, and you'll understand a little bit more if you're listening to this, how to apply it specifically. But like, if you want to acquire clients and you have a truly irresistible offer that you can create, you can send these magic connection method. It's like turning on a faucet of leads. It's like most people are chasing down clients, but what if you found a way to send these magic connection methods the magic connection method emails where they chase you down instead. So that's really what this is. It could be for acquiring clients. It could be for reaching out to strategic partnerships and doing joint ventures for people. It could be reaching out to, if you are a podcast host, getting guests on the podcast. If you want to acquire mentors or ask questions to people to help you take your business to the next level, it can be used in that context as well. So really, it's kind of up to this is the tool, and however you want to use the tool, as long as it's starting a relationship, this can open the door to make that happen.
Okay, this is excellent, because I'm going to share some experiences that I've had that are completely opposite that turn me off. One,
awesome.
It annoys the heck out of me on LinkedIn when they want to connect with you, they instantly connect with you, and then they just shoot off a blanketed email of like putting down your throat, come to this free class, do this free, directly into like, marry me. And I'm thinking, you're the one that asked to connect with me. Like, what is going on? And for me, because time is so sensitive, I immediately get rubbed the wrong way. And I almost always, I disconnect with them and I tell them, don't send me anything else again. And it just feels so gross when they just throw it out there within seconds of me accepting the connection. 2.
Right.
I actually opened it up in this interview with you saying, I don't always say yes to podcast pitches, not often at all, in fact. And you used this on me, and you did it in an authentic way, because I could tell that you did your homework. In fact, your application came through right before I got on a meeting with my content manager. So we read your application together because we happened to be talking about next guests. It was like also the best timing. And I remember Crystal telling me, oh my gosh, he did his homework. I think he'd be an amazing guest. And so it was really authentic that you had done your homework. You knew who I was. You knew who I would serve. And then you told me why you were the person that could help my audience. And as a podcast host, that is all I care about. And I get pitch after pitch about how amazing the person is. And I'm like, I don't care. And so I just want to validate everything you're saying as the person that holds the platform. I immediately say, I really don't care. I feel like it's my job to protect the platform and to serve my audience. And if someone that pitches me cannot tell me how they're going to help serve my audience, it's an immediate no. So
yeah. Well, thank you so much for that, Amber. I appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly. So just to validate that what you're sharing is truly that experience and gets results. So great. We'll go to step 2 now. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. So now we're at this point where we made it about them, right? And so it's 1 to 3 sentences, either mentioning a mutual connection, content, or compliment, or some combination of the 3 of them. Then I'll usually toss in kind of like a sentence in between where it's like, besides wanting to share that with you, I do have a quick question. Now, this is where we move into part 2 of the Magic Connection Method email or message. It's called the Irresistible Offer. And so I want to explain before I go into this, is that there's a big difference between an offer and an irresistible offer. There's this quote by Dean Jackson I like to quote all the time, that a compelling offer is 10 times more powerful than a convincing argument. So exactly what Amber was saying is like, how can you think from the perspective of the person that you're reaching out to? What is valuable to them? How can you put yourself in their shoes and understand what their goals are? And how can you reach out in a way where you make their life easier? Can you minimize risk and whether it be time or money risk in whatever they're focusing on? Can you position your offer so that they have a lot to gain? And how can you make it easy for them to say yes? And so I'll give you a few examples of an irresistible offer. One kind of like a funny one that you see, and then one that's kind of from my personal life is, Amber, have you seen those ads a lot lately about selling mattresses online?
Yes.
Yeah. So I love this as a perfect example for an irresistible offer, because look at how mattresses have been sold in the past, right? You go to a store and you kind of awkwardly lay on this bed that thousands of other people have laid on, fully clothed, and you kind of try to figure out if you want to spend a few $1,000s on this thing that you're going to spend a third of your, sleeping hours for the next few years on, right? So that's kind of a lame offer. But look at what these online mattress stores have done recently is they created an irresistible offer. They say, hey, you know what you can do is you can fill out this quiz and we're going to tell you what type of bed that we think is the best for you. And what we're going to do is we will ship this bed for you after you pay for it. And you can try it for 100 nights. You can sleep it in your PJs and be all cozy and really figure out if this is the thing for you. And if you don't like it, you can send it back. No problem with that. So that is an irresistible offer. That's what we're talking about. So what is the equivalent of an irresistible offer that you can create inside of the outreaches that you're creating, whether it's to acquire clients, strategic partnerships, or whatever it may be? And I'll go back to the story that I told from the very beginning. The first email that I ever sent to Jonathan, who was the guy that I initially worked with that kind of got me into these rooms and connecting with these incredible people, is I was a college student at the time, and I was subscribed to all of Jonathan's newsletters. I was in some of his content, consuming some of his courses, and I reached out to Jonathan. I said, hey, I've been following your stuff for a while. I've taken meticulous notes. I'm a marketing student, entrepreneurship student. And what I did is I came up with a few ideas that I think could help you acquire more clients, and I want to help you do this, and I don't want to be paid for it at all. So like that was the first irresistible offer that I created. And I even added to it, and I said, if you don't like my work, you can just tell me we can part ways. I'm not going to be offended. But if you do like my work, then maybe we can have a conversation about what it would be like to move forward with that relationship. So that was my first irresistible offer that I ever sent. And so, kind of just going back with the example that we're talking about with being on a podcast, if you're thinking from the perspective of a podcast host, just like Amber said, they want to have good guests that can serve their audience, right? And so what you can do if you're getting on these shows is think about from the perspective of how can you do that for them and tell them that you did work in advance that showed that you were the right person to help them serve their audience. So, some examples for you to think about from multiple contexts is, can you solve a problem that they currently have? Can you help them gain more exposure? Can you help them make more money? Can you make their lives easier? Those are all ways that you could begin to craft this irresistible offer. And then the last thing that I will say on this irresistible offer is kind of like the serial killer line with the hook. We want to still make sure that this is concise. We don't want to make this too crazy. It's just got to be simple and easy to digest. So even if you do have a plan to help them, grow their business, it needs to be pretty easily digestible. It's like, hey, I went on your site and I found these several things that I think might be super valuable for you. I came up with 5 specific ways that I think would be valuable for you, and I put it together in a Google Doc. And then maybe you can start with that. Say that you did the work ahead of time, and it's like, maybe would you be opposed to me sending that over for you to check out? So anyways, that's just thinking about it from the most easily digestible start to creating this irresistible offer and a very specific, tangible thing that they can understand that they would get as a result of responding to this email. So that's kind of a high-level overview of the irresistible offer. I've been talking a lot again. Amber, do you want to jump in here at all?
No, I love it. So just to reiterate, the goal is to know who you're speaking to, what their pain points are, know exactly how you can solve it, and then reduce the risk of either time or money or both.
Correct.
Perfect.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, I do have a question. So I'm thinking if I was driving in the car listening to Amber and Brandon talk, I would say, well, is that like is that a free training? Is it so got to be something that is personal? So for in your example, you offered a very specific thing to one person. But what if, for me example, what if I was offering a free thing, a masterclass, a free training to get them to serve them, yes, but to get them some value through that service? Is that a good thing to share as an irresistible offer? Or does it always have to be customized to that person and only a one-off?
That's a great question. I think the Magic Connection method is the most powerful when you are kind of going after a relationship that would be like either like a high ticket client or a very powerful relationship for you to have. So I would think that in that context, when you're trying to develop those levels of relationships, you wouldn't really want to send them to like an automated training or something like that. So to answer your question succinctly, I do think it is more about a customized approach for this kind of conversation that you're looking at generating with the Magic Connection method. Does that make sense?
It 100% makes sense. And I love this because there's now no assumption. So we're clear. This is a relationship, a mentorship, a high-end client, a podcast experience, getting on someone's platform. So all of that says it's a one-to-one customized experience. We're not doing one to the masses. And that clarifies it. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll just say you may be listening to this right now if you're driving, you're working out or whatever it is. It's like, this sounds like a lot of work, Brandon. I'm like, yeah, it kind of is. But like these relationships that you're having, like we're going back to the very beginning of Amber's definition of productivity is like, is it worth it for you to be able to spend more time on your best activities? Probably. And so if you are able to kind of craft these relationships, that's again, zooming back out so you can see the forest instead of just looking at the trees. That's really why this is so important. So yes, it will take time. You have to get to know them. You have to do your research. And you have to create an irresistible offer that makes the most sense for them, but the payoff is huge. And the other thing I will say really quickly is that once you get the hang of this process and you're sending, maybe you're trying to acquire high ticket clients or getting on podcasts or whatever it is, once you've done a few of the same kind of outreaches, it gets easier. If I will say, if you're starting a Magic Connection method and you're going to try to use this for strategic partnerships and clients and do all these different things at once, I would advise to pick one specific kind of outreach that you want to do and just stick with that for a little bit, because you're going to start to see what's going to work and you're going to see what irresistible offers are going to be best for the audience that you're reaching out to.
Okay. I love that you just said strategic partnerships. I work with a lot of clients that have it on their goal is to increase their strategic partnerships where it's a referral source back and forth. So for example, an interior designer wants a strategic partner with a builder, and the builder can send referrals, but what is the interior designer's value is that they're going to make the builder's job easier to serve the client for having in-house, consultations and doing that type of work. This magic connection can happen in that scenario is that you don't need 100 referral sources. You need 3 to 5 really good referral sources, but it starts with a relationship and knowing how you can serve them and exactly what you're going through right here. So I just wanted to pull that out as this is very applicable across all industries, because I believe all industries, we need strategic partnerships.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And can I share an additional ninja strategy that I haven't talked about a lot publicly with you, Amber?
Yes, please give it to us.
So I've been thinking about this a lot lately as a podcast host. So if you're listening to this right now and you are not a podcast host, I would highly encourage you to become one, or at least consider being one, because not only is it an incredible opportunity to serve your target audience, it is an incredible relationship building tool. Because think about the way that you could acquire strategic partnerships if you started by simply adding value to them and being a good interviewer and giving them a great experience on your show. So it can be super non-invasive if you're like, hey, Amber, use a Magic Connection method to get them on your podcast, make them look really good, show them off to your audience. And that starts an incredible relationship, which may lead to a strategic partnership. So I would encourage people listening right now is if you don't have a podcast or some kind of a platform, using the Magic Connection method can have downstream effects if you simply leverage the first experience as giving them a ton of value, featuring them on your platform. And then if a strategic partnership comes out of that because you've developed the relationship stronger because of the exposure you've given them, that's another way that you could do this. So there's multiple layers to this, but it's always about how can you show up adding value first. And then once you have a few conversations with somebody, maybe it'll lead down the road of it turning into a strategic partnership or a client or something of that nature.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. And ironically, you came on right as I was closing out with my last guest. And my last guest was a doctor that specializes in burnout. And I know you heard me tell her this, right? I said, I'm going to stay connected with you. I believe that there's people in my audience that have issues with burnout, and I will be referring them to you. That's not my zone of genius. I didn't know her body of work. I got to get to know her. She came on and served my audience through the interview. And that relationship you just shared was actually flipped. I'm the host and I saw an opportunity to connect my audience with someone that could help them. Now I'm a strategic referral to her, right? So
exactly.
That's relationships. Seriously. Okay, this is all great stuff. Thank you so much. Next. Number 3.
Yes. Okay. So this is we're down the home stretch. This is super easy. So let's zoom back out a little bit. So now we've shown up that we've done research for them. We show that we cared about them. We have this powerful hook. We've shown that we have something that we can give them that's insanely valuable, right? An irresistible offer. In my case, I can use kind of how I've been reaching out to podcasts. It's like I put together 3 specific topics that I know would be very valuable to your audience. Okay. So like that, and I put it together in a Google Doc. So like that's kind of like the irresistible offer that I'm framing about doing the research on the podcast. Now the last part is simply going back to the very beginning, the very first thing I mentioned about the magic connection method is we just need them to respond. That is it. No, nothing else. And so in the past, I just asked a standard question that you would assume that you would ask is just like, do you want me to send this over for you to check out or something like that? But then I read the book, Never Split the Difference, and I actually had the chance to meet the author, Chris Voss. And if you haven't had the chance to read this book or you don't know what this book is, Never Split the Difference and Chris Voss. Chris was a ex-FBI hostage negotiator. So this is the guy that is on the phone with a lunatic that's in the bottom of a basement with several $1 million, 20 hostages, and he's about to blow up the whole place. So like, what do you say as that hostage negotiator to make sure that doesn't happen and people end out safely? So he's got all these crazy, negotiation strategies he's learned over the years. And one of my favorite concepts that Chris teaches is this concept of a no-oriented question. And the way I like to explain that is this. Every single day, we have a finite amount of yeses that we can give, right? Because what happens when you say yes to something? It means that you're giving away your time. It means you're giving away your energy. You have to give away something if you are saying yes to it. But compare that with the exact opposite. What happens when you say no to something? You feel more secure. You feel more in control. And you don't feel like you're being pressured into something when you have the ability to say control. And so what you can do is instead of asking like a yes-oriented question, like, are you interested or do you want me to send this over to you? You can ask a no-oriented question, which would be, would you be opposed for me to send over this Google Doc for you to check out? And then don't ask anything else after that, because now it puts the ball in their court. It's no longer like, hey, let me push this at you. Let me make sure you see this. But rather, would you be opposed to me sending this over? Would it be a bad idea if, or would it be ridiculous if ... And you can kind of complete the sentence there. So now we flipped it and we made it so that they're leaning in and are interested in hearing more about the offer that you've created. So putting this all together, I could reach out to Amber and I could say, hey, Amber, love this episode of your podcast, specifically loved your definition of productivity. Thank you so much for sharing that and with your incredible audience. Besides wanting to share that with you, I do have a quick question for you. I put together, a doc with that I think would be super valuable to your audience that has 3 specific topic ideas. Would it be a bad idea if I sent that over for you to check out? And I think I framed that a little, I did that off the top of my head, but I hope I framed it kind of similar to that. But that's kind of how it all works together. And then once they respond yes or no, it wouldn't be a bad idea, that's when you can open the door to conversations that will lead to you developing these incredible relationships.
Oh my goodness. I love how simple you made this. It feels so actionable. And for me, this is new things that I've learned, but I'm literally shaking my head like, yes, it works on me. Like that is the thing that gets me to say yes or engage. So behaviorally, you've hacked like the things that lead to ultimately a yes versus defenses going up, feeling like someone's stalking you or just trying to shove something down your throat, all the way down to the third step of, you're so right. It is so much safer to say no. And that's your default answer. And it takes a heck of a lot of convincing to move to a yes, especially with somebody you don't know. So just flipping that question increases the likelihood that you get a response.
Yeah. And Amber, I would love to get your opinion on this. So hopefully this is okay. But like you teach these classes on mastering your email, right? Am I correct by saying that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, when you're managing your email, I mean, tell me what you think. It's like when you're going through email, you're processing, right? You're kind of going through really quickly and your default mode is kind of no, right? Like you're like, oh, I don't like this. Let me delete this. Or like, let me make sure I archive this. And it's like that's kind of like the mindset that you're in when you're going through your email. And so for me, at least from what I've heard other people say, it's like it kind of fits in with the mind state that people are already in. It's like it just kind of melts right into the rest of the email processing because it's like, it allows you to say no, which is what you're doing in the rest of your email. So I'd be curious to hear what you think about that. You can tell me if I'm completely wrong and I'm fine with that, but I'm just kind of curious to hear what you would think.
That is a great connection. And anyone that's listening, think about how you're interacting with your inbox. So you tend to just cherry pick the easy no's, delete, archives, like FYI. Where you get stuck is when there's actually a decision to be made. In fact,
right.
the method that I teach in my Conquer Your Email Masterclass is the 5 simple email decisions, because it is the lack of making a decision that keeps your inbox completely full. So if you are an email in someone's inbox, now we're moving to the marketing side of it, not the person processing their emails, is you want to make it as easy for them to say yes or to respond to your email. And that does not mean a huge long email. There's so many people out there that say more than, 3 short paragraphs or a few sentences, and they'll say, I'll get to that someday later. And that is exactly how your email will fall off the page and get forgotten about forever if it's long. And that's something that you shared in your tips that I want to make sure everybody heard was you were like, 2 to 3 sentences, keep it really short. You're not serial killer stalking them, because also that email gets so long, it will never, ever get reviewed. It just feels like too much energy to give to some random person that showed up in your inbox.
Yeah. And I think the other beauty of this is like, it ends with a question. Right. So it's would it be a bad idea if I sent this over? And don't add anything else. No PS. I mean, you could put your name after it, but like I don't add anything else after that. So if I'm looking at it from a skimmer's perspective, they already saw it briefly. If they didn't even read the email, they saw the first line was about them, which is different from what they're already receiving. And then if they just skip to the bottom, they see it ends in a question mark. It's very clear about what you need to do. And usually the responses I get to the emails are like, no, not a bad idea. Please send over more information. It's less than some people just say, 2-3 word response. And so it's super easy to respond to it. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation, because I do think that it just fits into the natural mode of how people process emails. So that was kind of cool that we got that in there too.
Yeah. And the other piece to this too, that I feel the word that's coming to me is violated when it happens, but you're asking for permission. You're like honoring their inbox. You're honoring that you had access to them, whether it was through LinkedIn or their website or a contact form or whatever that form is. You're honoring them by asking, is it, well, you're saying the opposite, but really you're getting permission to send them something else instead of making assumptions. And that just feels icky to me. I don't know why, but it just does when someone blasts stuff off to me.
Right. Yeah. Super powerful stuff. So I appreciate your additional insights to add there.
This is great. I actually do have a question before the 3 steps that I wanted to circle back to. And you did reference that this does take time and research. Do you have any pro tips or simple tips to help our listeners do the research it takes to execute on the magic connection method?
Great question. I mean, I'm a productivity nerd and I could probably talk about this kind of stuff all the time. So I'm sure maybe you and I can even have a separate conversation about all the weird stuff that we do as productivity nerds. But let me just talk about really quickly. There's 2 questions that I get when I'm talking about doing research and this kind of stuff. Some people ask, how do I find their emails? That's a really good thing that you want to know is if you want to send emails to people, you need to figure out how to use their email. There's a Chrome extension you can use called Hunter, hunter.io, I believe. And you can basically, what it is, you can go on somebody else's website and let's say I'm just going to come up with a random domain. So just don't judge me for whatever's going to come out of my mouth. Let's say it's like applepicking.com. So you can go on applepicking.com and then click the Chrome extension hunter.io, and it's going to pull all of the email addresses that have been publicly listed or used that are associated with applepicking.com. So that's a really quick way that you can research and find someone's email address. I mean, as far as like high level research, the places I like to look for are like LinkedIn. I like to look at their personal website. I like to look at their about page. But I would say at a really, really high level, that's what I like to do. And the other thing I don't want to skip out on, Amber, that I realized I didn't mention is people ask me, what do you put as the subject line, right? And so the other thing that you can think about is, and you have to think about it again from the perspective of the person that's reading the email or receiving the email, is you basically want to create a subject line that is a condensed version of the irresistible offer so that they can see from the very beginning what the value add is by them just opening the email to begin with. So hopefully that didn't go all over the place in answering that question, but those are just a few ways that I wanted to make sure I added on.
Yes, no, I love those. I love those tips because I can write an email and you're right. I get stumped at the subject line. I'm like, if it's not really good, if it's not right, it's going to turn them off. So I love the tip about the subject line. The Hunter app, hunter.io, I've actually used that myself. I was turned on to it by someone else. And the other thing that it does is if it's not a published email, it'll tell you what the formula is. So they'll say it's like first name dot last initial and then at, at applepicking.com. So even if you can't find the email, you can take a stab at who you're reaching out to and what you think their email is. So it's it's really a great hack.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure you can too, like if you guessed at it, if you search hunter.io email verifier or something like that, you can take an email that you kind of guessed and plug it in there, and then it'll tell you if it's deliverable or if it's going to bounce or not. And another thing that you can do to see if you guessed correctly is if you go inside of Gmail, you put their email address in the sender thing, and then you kind of click enter like you're going to compose the email. If the little icon above their name changes from just like the standard templated thing to an actual like picture of them, it's associated with a Gmail account and it's actually deliverable, and you kind of hit gold. So that's another little hack that you can do if you want to try to check to make sure that the email you're sending to is deliverable.
All right. I think that the last question that's coming up for me to round this out, and I think you can speak to this, is I believe it would probably be really important to know what the end goal is, right? So when you reached out to Jonathan, I believe his name was, like, you knew that your end goal was you wanted to be probably associated with his business or something. Like then you back that up into a stepping stone of let me show you what I'm capable of. And if that works, you just kind of asked him to go to the next step and then we can talk about it then. And so that was a long way of asking this question or validating my assumption rather, is that it's really important not to do all these steps and not know what your total end game is and be super, super clear about what you want out of that relationship.
100%. The only thing that I would add to that is think about it. Even if you can't get the end outcome that you're looking at achieving, you can also just show up and give value. Like if it doesn't turn out the way you don't like, I have a keyboard shortcut. And again, this goes into my productivity stuff, but I use Alfred all the time. And I have a keyboard shortcut where if I type in the word help, it pops up on the screen. What's the number one thing you need the most help with right now? And I'm always asking that, even if it doesn't turn into me being on their podcast. They say, I've done it before. I've reached out to them and like, hey, it's not a good time right now, or reach out to me back to me in the future. I'm like, that's fine. I really appreciate you getting back to me, just because I'm always connecting with other people right now. I'm on other podcasts. I'm bringing people on. I always like to ask, what's the number one thing that you need the most help with right now? And maybe if I have a connection for you, I can make that happen for you in the future. So again, it's another one of those things where it's like, even if it doesn't turn out, I've had situations where I've asked that, I've found a good resource for someone, and it's turned into a great relationship that way. So I think if you just show up giving and showing that you can add value to people, there's very little that can go wrong when you take this kind of approach.
And I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much for being on here, Brandon, and sharing your methods with us. If our listeners want to hear more and connect with you and find out what you're up to, where can they do that at?
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for asking. So if you enjoyed listening to this interview and you want to hear me interview other incredible people, you can check out the 7-Figure Millennials podcast. And the idea behind that is, again, to inspire entrepreneurs to prioritize their happiness, health, and relationships while making their biggest entrepreneurial dreams a reality. So focusing on the really important things in life instead of sacrificing the stuff that we see so many people sacrifice for. So that's an easy way if you're already inside of your podcast app. Amber, I know we had discussed ahead of time. I should have clarified beforehand. I have a gift that I can give your audience. Is that okay if I share that?
100%. I'm looking forward to it. Please do.
Sweet. So if you go, this is going to be a different domain name. Just, you probably haven't heard it before, and I'll explain in a second. But if you go to bfo.ng/PST for Productivity Straight Talk, so that's bfo.ng/Productivity Straight Talk, That's my domain. I bought, it's actually a Nigerian domain because I wanted the short link BFong, which is, Brandon Fong. So bfo.ng/PST, that'll take you to a page that I created specifically for Productivity Straight Talk listeners. And I asked myself, what would be the number one thing that I could give listeners to this show? And I thought, well, if I know the Magic Connection Method emails work and I want to reduce the barrier of entry of people actually using it, why don't I just write some of the Magic Connection Method emails for you? And if you can copy and paste them, then you can be well on your way to actually making this happen. If you go to bfo.ng/PST, you can put in your email address right there. And then the very next page, you're going to get a download where you can just kind of copy and paste. It's a Google Doc. You can use that. And there's a whole bunch of other links on there as well that'll be good value add for you. And then the last thing is if you do just want to go right into the meat of it, you can go to magicconnectionmethod.com. The book, I have a little mini book I wrote on the Magic Connection Method. It's $7. I'm not here to make a lot of money on this. It's just to add value to you. And if you use the coupon code 7FM at checkout, that's the coupon code I give to my listeners. I unlock a whole bunch of other bonuses that you can have as well, including like a little mini masterclass that I did on walking through even some of the advanced automation stuff that I use while maintaining the fact that I'm customizing the outreach. So there's a whole bunch of goodies in there. And so that's the coupon code 7FM when you go to magicconnectionmethod.com. So I think that's it. But hopefully that's super valuable for you guys.
We'll make sure that all of this is in the show notes. If you didn't grab it, you can click on the links inside any app that you're listening to this podcast and be able to connect for all those gifts and freebies from Brandon. All right. Thank you so much for being on here. You were a wealth of knowledge, and thanks for bringing something incredibly useful and valuable to Productivity Straight Talk listeners.
Thank you, Amber. This has been a blast. I really appreciate it.
Man, I sure hope you found today's episode to be as valuable as I did. I had so many, as we recorded, ahas and connecting dots. And while he was speaking, I was nodding my head this makes so much sense to me, and I hope it does you. And I was so excited about the conversation that as I had one-on-one coaching conversations with my clients, I spoke about this. I said, oh my gosh, just wait till this episode comes out. This is going to be so incredibly valuable. Because here's the thing. When you think about marketing and visibility for your business, one of my favorite methods are strategic partners. Think of the strategic partners that are serving similar clientele, but not in the same way, that would be great referral partners. This is a great method to build those relationships. And, I believe I said it in this episode, and in case I didn't, and if I did, I'm going to echo it again here, is that I can think back to some of the biggest wins in my business and movement, and it's always been relationships. It's going to be relationships with my peers and my friends and my business friends who introduced me to someone or made a particular connection, right? Those were the easiest ways to have movement in my business. It was so much easier than doing cold pitching or cold marketing or just throwing things at the wall, as all of us business owners have done from time to time to see what sticks as we experiment. It has been for me always a relationship that has created the most flow, ease, path of least resistance, consistency with results, and honestly, full circle to productivity and time management, saved me time because someone else opened the door for me. Someone else made the introduction. And I'm not saying it's not worth doing, the experiments and finding what works, but when somebody can open a door for you, it is so incredibly valuable. So with this method that he gave us the tool for our toolbox to go out into the world and make these relationships, make these connections, whether they're mentorships or collaborations or strategic partnerships, that you have that tool to go out and do it. No change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. I would love for you to take the framework that he shared with us today and try it out. Send your first email, reach out to someone who has been on your mind, who is on that wish list of who you would love to be connected with. Sit down, do the research, and make the ask. Take action today. All right. So before we close it out today, just one final reminder to make sure you get your hands on my free mini training, Take Back Your Time. That's right. You're listening to Productivity Straight Talk. So I know productivity is top of mind. And with productivity comes great time management. So a great place to start is to join me inside my on-demand, anytime you want to watch it, free mini training, Take Back Your Time. Head on over to amberdelagarza.com/take back your time. So that's my straight talk for you today. Until next time, have a productive week.